over 25 years of this is managed biotensegrity and neuromyofascial research. The work challenges traditional linear biomechanics, offering innovative approaches that honor the body's volumetric architecture to improve healing and instruction, dedicated to bringing ancient wisdom and modern science for structural integrity and resilience. Transformative. Take it away.
Thank you. Thank you. And get all of the tech hooked up. No, it's good. Okay. Well, I'm so grateful to be here with you all. I've wanted to come to this Congress for many, many years. And when I found out it was in New Orleans, where my whole entire family is from, I knew this was the time to come. And I'm very excited to share with you some of the synthesis explorations of how biotensegrity changes the game in a bigger context. So we're going to kind of soar up to the eagle eye view today. It's so fascinating how many different applications and fractal sizes of implications biotensegrity and fascia research has for us. I have been a movement lover and guide and teacher for over 25 years. And I work one-on-one and in classes and in many different disciplines. Right now, I am mostly a one-on-one gyrotonic trainer and movement coordination, nervous system, and Ayurvedic coach. I'm looking at biotensegrity from the level of the postural locomotor system. There has been an explosion of embodied practices. I call that in a big umbrella of mindful movement, where we are tuning into some level of our felt sense. This is indicative of the need we have in our modern day. We all know here, at least from a neuromyofascial perspective, that we have this myriad benefits of tuning into the body through movement. Whether this is in a class setting or a therapeutic setting, we have stress reduction, nervous system regulation, and learning that for ourselves and teaching that to our clients. And it's also how we digest our life experience. Tom Myers talks about how our motor neurons are the only way out of the digestion of life, that we intake through our sensory pathways, make sense of things, have a response, and the completion of the response comes through movement of some kind. Of course, we have all the benefits of interoception that we've been hearing about all week, and of this sense of self and belonging and who we are. And personally, that saved my life when I was a teenager. Also, this is how we can most tangibly build resilience in our nervous system, in our physical tissues, in our mental and emotional states. And of course, we need movement variety in the world that we live in today. There are many different places where alignment is based on this outdated biomechanics, and it is so sneaky. I can't even believe how sneaky it is sometimes. And there are about 50 million people in the United States alone practicing yoga and Pilates, many more millions outside of the US, and many more in other disciplines that are still based on something about form and shape, where we're thinking about what is right. And if we think about what's right and wrong, it really limits the infinite possibilities of our movement. This alignment is outdated, as we probably all know, on this rectilinear idea of biomechanics. And it's a tool, but when we describe even flexion and extension, it's not reality, because we are never in one plane at once. So even the way those words work in our subconscious assumptions really takes us away from what we see and what we need. Grid and biomechanics is for the spectator. It's not for our body. Monoplanar movement in a volumetric three-dimensional world ends up disintegrating our system and pulling our joints apart. It can distort our force distribution and our nervous system signaling. I'm going to tell you more details about that in a moment. Biotensegrity offers us a new model for force distribution that is volumetric, nonlinear, and as Joanne Avison, who I wish was here, describes omnidirectional radiance in the round. It's a fullness and awareness through a volume, and that distribution of force is fractal. So through the volume all the way down to the cell, as we've been talking about here, I'm going to look at the joints and the postural locomotor system. We could say biomechanics is more of a bioemotional experience, that we're soft matter instead of a machine, that we're really looking at the whole system rather than the parts. I personally love this as a yogi practicing for about 40 years. Crazy, I know, maybe that's a little long. The oneness that is coming through so many disciplines of science the further they go. I read about 6 months ago that the leading edge of physics is not about particles, but about relationships. Of course, we're finding that here more and more. And in yoga, as a life view, it is all about that relationship and resonance. Actually, stick a pin in this. The oldest known movement in the yoga tradition came out of a sonic resonant practice of spontaneous fluid movement. If you want to talk about that, connect with me later. So we have an opportunity to redefine alignment. Because if we're thinking of distributing force through a volume, through big movement and through movement practices or movement diagnostics and therapies, how are we distributing? Through the joints. Because if we're thinking of volumetric distribution, the joints themselves need to have their own integrity for force to pass through. They are key to biotensegral distribution. Who here has heard of joint centration? Okay, great. This completely changed my life. This is one way to say that we have alignment inside at the level of the joint. I use this because, femur acetabulum makes a lot of sense with a fist and a cup of a hand. It's this perfect or ideal nested relationship of the joint surfaces where there's an equal synovial space relationship between those surfaces, where there's not compression or pulling, even a little bit, ideally, through the structure. And what's shown here on the left with the green is that the vector of force that passes straight through the joint. And on the right would be when it's not in that optimal relationship. The vector of force is not passing straight through. We can have a pathological contact of the bones, of the articular cartilage and damage over time, and a pulling away on the other side. Those blue and purple lines on the side are demonstrating the activation of the muscle tissue and the tension distribution in the fascia and the ligaments as well. When we don't have the force distribution right through the joint, the tone is distorted and the engagement is distorted. So the only way we can tell if we are in this optimal relationship is either with imaging or through the sensation of action in your tissues. I'll give you a little example. If I were to fall really hard and try to catch myself, it wouldn't end up so well, right? Because if we think of this like a hose, which is a really unsexy but super useful metaphor, the force would go out in a different direction. It's taken me years to train myself to feel like this is normal. And we get subconsciously used to the felt sense pattern of what this is. But if I tune in very carefully, I do feel a traffic jam and a stretch on one side instead of here, where because it's more distributed, I feel less. It's actually harder to teach because it's so easy. It feels better. When we're in that place, we have the maximum distribution, contribution, and collaboration of the tissues around the joint. Joints are always curved. The synovial surfaces are always curved, and they're always curved in an asymmetry in all three planes. Those were shaped from our movement, from ancestral movement, mostly gait and walking. If we think on the level of the whole body, postural locomotor system, we can think of the joints as these nodes in the three-dimensional biotensegrity meshwork. They're giving us clues as to our dialing or our alignment from the inside out. Because our neuromyofascia is considered pretty accepted as one system, although maybe it's not a system, as John Sharkey would say, those nodes are also the communication of the nervous system. Because the ligaments are so highly innervated, they almost act as local sensory organs. If there's a distortion in a joint, your nervous system is tracking that and will say, oh, hey, that's not that safe. Where I come from in yoga, when there has been, although it's changing, this initiative to always open or go further or be perfect, we get used to the sensations that we feel because we're told it's right. Then we normalize hanging out at the edges, or we normalize this disintegration of the communication of the structure and the architecture of our neuromuscular communication as well. When we have spatial integrity, we have more nervous system integrity. These images are extreme variation. They're a bit pathological. They are publicly available on the internet. I use them in my teaching just to show the variety. Also that none of our joints are right angle pivot points. Nothing is monoplanar in structure or in resulting movement. Nothing is rectilinear. And articular integrity, what we could redefine as alignment on the inside, will never fit into a grid. There's actually more and more injuries happening in these disciplines. I personally know about 7 people in the last 18 months or so who are my contemporaries in the yoga world who are having hip surgeries or back surgeries. I know 2 longtime Pilates teachers who are having back surgeries as well. We could do better. We can really maximize the benefit of these practices for the need that exists. What are we really aligning to? These ideas from the outside that are taking the driver's seat over the intelligence and the felt sense of our body. This idea of perfection, putting the brain over the body or the outside form over the inside alignment. We do not want to pull our joints apart, but I also want to teach you something. Bring your right hand to your forehead or your left hand. And go like this. Don't worry about it. It takes a lot of work to do that. This is not a research peer-reviewed statistic, but there is a lot of anecdotal data. It takes about 11 or 12 years of high dedication and repetition to these forms. It's not only these forms. There are different dance and fitness modalities and even some PT modalities, definitely not all of them, probably not anyone here, that are using these maps of movement. But it takes a long time to do it because our body is designed to move in 3 dimensions, in gravity, on a spinning planet where gravity is also nonlinear. It's radial. If we add variety, we'll probably be okay. I personally experienced this, part of why it put me on this path. About 22 years ago, I was in a car accident that wasn't that bad. And I sprained my SI joint. At the time, I look back and there was this pattern of, in the yoga world around me, unstable SI, tight psoas, no glutes. We were actually taught to check our SI joints and fix them as if that was normal. And we didn't question it, which I question now why we didn't question it. I was told a story about 7 years ago by one of my teachers, Frey Faust, of the Axis syllabus. Has anyone heard of the Axis syllabus? Someone he knew had a tree fall on his head and he broke his ankle. His body was distributing the force so that it flowed through and ideally could have exited into the earth. But he had strained and sprained his ankle a couple times in the recent past. That was the weak link. So that was indicative of the soft tissues. For me, in my car accident, again, not that bad, the force couldn't go through me into the seat. What was I doing at that time? Putting my leg behind my head over and over and over and doing these rectilinear hip stretches that if you ever know someone in yoga, you do pigeon, forget the perpendicular line of your leg, forget it. So there's this paradox where what's simple for our brain on the outside is harder on our body on the inside. What's easier for our body on the inside is harder for our brain to wrap around, to describe, to cue, because again, it's easier. It feels better. There's less sensation because we're getting less stretch. This is a proposal for thinking about alignment as internally supportive relationships, articular congruency or joint centration, the matching of the synovial topographies that allows for the tensegrity distribution and transfer of forces between and through body parts and through also our support and our choice of motion. Joint centration is viewed from the scale of the postural locomotor system as nodes in biotensegrity as a model. From this most tangible physical level of movement cueing, force distribution is a continuum. The more we are looking for this distribution through the joints, the more the force is going to be distributed to all the fractal smaller layers that we've been talking about for these days together. There's good news. It's actually fairly easy to adapt. The trick is it's just really hard because we have these assumptions of how we're mapping space. It's kind of like when we discovered the world was round, it just made a whole different paradigm, and then it was obvious. That's the hard thing, that's the challenge, but it's actually pretty easy to make these adaptations. I've summarized a few of these into keys that probably these first are things we do already. They are really key to get us out of thinking our way into movement and then feeling where we are, but to feel our way into it. Number one is variety is the best medicine. Variety of pathway, of patterns, of tone, of rhythm, of time of day, right? Of bodies. This includes our uniqueness. The only bad movement is to do the same thing over and over strictly and get yourself stuck in a rut and decrease your options. Number two, prioritize and lead by sensation. We'll get all of the benefits from interoception, nervous system regulation, but also this is how we feel what's happening around a particular joint or through joint complexes, kinetic chains, and through the whole body. Number three, motion. We were made from and for and through being in motion, even if it's imperceptible. Motion is going to increase your proprioception for number two. Even just yield and push. Sometimes I say pour and push for my clients, my students. Pulsation through and between places, transitional motions, and looking for the most ways in and out of things. Then my favorite, nonlinear, also as a longtime hula hooper and gyrotonic teacher, is that instead of thinking in parallel, square, flat, straight, stacked, toasters, walls, this kind of thing, think like nature. Think like rivers, spirals, obliques, and diagonals, which are just little like slices of spirals. If we're thinking of volume in a spherical sense, this is how we would move through maybe the curvature of space-time, something like that. I add here, counterchirality is a word borrowed from chemistry. That is the opposing spirals and dialing that comes from walking in our arms and legs. In the Access Syllabus movement research community, we're looking for new language, and some of the new language is osculation for the three-dimensional movement of the spine. It's a line that describes a sphere from mathematical terms, and flotation to include flexion and rotation instead of just monoplanar biomechanics. And of course, oneness. When one thing changes, everything changes. Let's try it out. We're going to try something super simple. From standing, lift one leg. You can hold on to the chair if you want. Really straight, and take a somatic map of what's happening around your hip, in front, underneath, inside, outside. Once you get that, switch sides. Breathe, smile. Feel, if you were coloring it in, what do you feel? And then we're going to think it through because of time. We could just say, how's the easiest place? What if you scooped and dialed? Does it feel easier?
Yeah.
Raise your hand if it feels easier. Awesome. Raise your hand if you feel your glutes and you didn't before. That's kind of good. The other side. I'm going to make a sticker that says, when in doubt, it's your glutes, because the world of chairs, right? Try it on the other side. Sometimes it's so subtle, it's hard to check. That is all about changing the game of how we think about alignment in this way.